To start us with, Benjamin, maybe I pass to you to set the scene a little bit.
Where do we stand today for Pillar 1? After good progress last year, things were much more difficult in 2020, very clearly, for a number of reasons. The discussion have been dragging behind for a long time. And I've experienced a significant acceleration before the summer. And to a point that during the summer, some countries were even considering whether Pillar 2 could be concluded separately. The European Union and also most of its member states individually have held the line that it's better not to split. Now, the element of complexity from the European Union side is the own resource discussion. One of the new own resource, which will be established notably to help repaying the debts that we will take under EU Next Generation, will be based on taxation of the digital sector. And this own resource process has a calendar of its own, which does not necessarily fully match the OECD calendar. Initially, we were hoping for an OECD agreement this year. This is impossible. The new deadline now is set for mid-2021. As far as the own resources are concerned, we need to table a legislative proposal by June next year. This proposal will obviously take into account to the maximum possible extent where we stand in the OECD, but to be able to table a proposal in June, this proposal has to be prepared basically already in spring. With the own resource package and what has been discussed between Parliament, Council and Commission, we need to generate with the new own resources taken collectively 16 to 18 billion euro a year. A large chunk will come from the articulation between the reform of the emission trading scheme and the carbon border adjustment mechanism, but some will have to come as well from the digital levy. And the OECD process as such is not generating much income.
Will I pass over to you? You've listened to Benjamin now. Maybe your initial reactions to the proposals. How do you see it? How have your clients seen it? And how has it been discussed also in the context of the American Chamber of Commerce, where you chair the committee?
You know, this is an enormously complex project working to what is essentially a political timetable. And you can see some of the stresses and strains in both pillars, but particularly in Pillar 1. And again, the OECD and the blueprint have been very open, transparent about the issues which still require political agreement. And they are substantial. They're around scope. They're around issues like segmentation, or to put that in plain English, you know, do I break a business up by lines of business, some of which may be very profitable, some which may not be? We're at a tipping point here. One of the things that I'm very clear about, and I say this consistently, is that this is not something where if anybody, a country or a business group or whomever, you know, manages to stop the OECD getting agreement, that everything will just magically go back to the way it was before, to the status quo ante. It won't. It won't. Too many things have changed, and again, as Benjamin said, you know, the impact of COVID, the fact that, you know, take the US, this year alone, and we're not at the end of the year, this year alone has spent $3 trillion just in emergency support for the economy. You know, a lot of that can be raised in an era of low-cost debt by just issuing more debt, although that bill does eventually come due. But some of this is going to have to be raised by other fiscal measures, including tax. Benjamin has talked about the own resources discussion, and clearly that's an important part of what will go on there. National economies, national governments will also be looking to raise that money. So, you know, there is no return to the status quo ante. These are problems, both political and technical, which we'll have to solve. And there are, you know, good reasons for keeping financial services out of this, given that they are largely nationally based, largely locally regulated, and quite often, and particularly, you know, post the global financial crisis, quite heavily taxed in some respects.
The demarcation is so difficult in this whole area, not just in financial service, but in the whole digital space, between what is a digital service, what is a financial services, who is providing a service to the financial service industry, or to another industry. Can say something about that. Partially, I think this will come down to European implementation, but I think a lot of concern around this is around the, demarcation, clarity, application of the legislation.
The scope is not agreed yet. So there's much still to be discussed, and notably, as Will was saying, whether you split the company to isolate their digital activity or not. For us, European Union, you will need to go through some directive transposing it. And each time you have a discussion on directive, you obviously have a complex mechanic since we need unanimity. There's always a risk that some may try to put some gold plating on the text and add some elements which were not initially foreseen in the OECD approach. It is possible that an OECD-derived solution would have to be combined with some other action. I don't think anyone has ever said that the only taxation possible of the digital sector is the one under discussion at the OECD. What we have to avoid by definition are measures that would fuel trade tension. Very clearly, we have nothing to gain with trade tension. And we have also to avoid measures which would overlap with the OECD ones. Now, the OECD one, they cover a certain set of company, and they cover direct taxation. The vast majority of the companies of the digital sector are not covered by the OECD measures. So if someone anywhere in the world want to do something for companies which are not covered by the OECD measures, they would fail to understand why the OECD process would make it impossible. What we need to make sure is that no company would be asked to pay twice.